Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be sharing my testimony in full. I'll try to be as concise as possible, but I just want to, give like a brief overview of how I came to Christ and from the very beginning, like what happened from the very beginning until I made the decision that I wanted Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior. So there's kind of three parts to it, like where I was with God before I fell into the occult, and then how I fell into the occult and what happened there, and then lastly, after I believed in Jesus, how did Jesus Christ and how did the Bible like save my life? How did that like walk me out of bondage? And I'll probably leave the third part as another video because otherwise we would just kind of be here forever. So I don't remember a time when I did not believe in God. I don't even know how to explain how I believe in it. I guess it always made sense to me that we came from something, and we weren't just like a force for some reason. I believed above all that God was love, and that love like triumphed over evil. And I did believe in a personal being. I believed that if I prayed to God, he would hear me. And it wasn't just like we were made out of like some random energy, right? Like someone thought to make us as humans, like, and created us like with that in mind. So I believed in God, and I had many moral convictions growing up in my childhood and my teenage years. I strongly tried to be as moral as possible, and I wanted to be a good person, and those things mattered to me a lot. There were certain things I chose not to do when some of my friends would do, just because I felt like morally convicted to not do those things. So for example, like when everyone was like having sex or doing drugs or something like that, I decided, no, I'm not going to do that for some reason. I don't think that's a good idea. And that's kind of as far as I got. But yeah, so I was generally a very like trying to be morally ethical, trying to be morally ethical person. So when I became a teenager, I started to struggle with depression, and I don't really remember when it first started, but probably when I was in seventh grade. Yeah, so when I was seventh to eighth grade, I think that was like when, puberty starts hitting, and I just realized a lot of things that I didn't see before, and I felt like there was something wrong with my household. There was a lot of strife in my household. We were always arguing, and we could never understand each other. And I didn't understand why it felt like communication was so difficult. And I started like questioning what was wrong with my family or what was wrong with the world. Are other families like this? And I started to feel very lethargic. So I felt like I'd always like not want to do anything. I never had enough energy for anything. I didn't want to do my schoolwork, and doing my schoolwork and studying was a very difficult task for me. I had to like convince myself that this stuff was important, even though I kind of believed in the back of my head that it wasn't. I come from an Asian household. So, peer pressure and getting straight A's was really, really important. And although my parents were not like super tiger mom or any of that, which I'm really grateful for, basically the stereotype that Asian parents like drive their kids to get straight A's, right? And if they don't, then you get punished. So I was never really punished for that. My parents would just get disappointed. So I'm really grateful that my parents were actually like quite lenient compared to some of the other stories I would hear in, my high school. I grew up in high school with mostly Asian people. So my whole life, I just grew up in Silicon Valley. Everyone is all about performance, straight A's. It was a very difficult environment to grow up in. And I didn't have much of like a real childhood. Um, well, I mean, as a child, it was great because I just would read books all day. I was kind of like a bookworm. I'd finish the whole children's book section, But as a teenager, by the time I got to seventh grade, I realized that studying was really, really important in the Silicon Valley area. And that was like my life from seventh grade to college. And that's when I actually started struggling with depression. I believe there are many reasons why I struggle with depression, and that's something I would definitely go into detail into another video. But besides the fact that I don't learn very well in a school environment, like I said before, I felt like there were things happening in my household and my family that I could not put my finger on. And I personally emotionally felt drained from life, from school, from so many of these things. So when I was in high school, I remember there was one point, right? So I would lock myself in the bathroom because I didn't want to talk to anyone, and I would just listen to music. And I did that for many, many nights when I was in high school, just kind of like that emo phase that I went through. And I remember this one night I locked myself in the bathroom and I was kneeling before the toilet. And I prayed to God, asking him, is there another way to live? Is this it? Is it just about school? Is this I just felt like there was no meaning in life. And I just felt so depressed, what could I do? And it was interesting because it was around that same time that some of my high school friends brought me to church. So I've had Christian friends throughout my childhood, but it was in high school that some people really brought me out to church. And that's when I started learning about Christianity. When I was in college, my freshman year, I met a guy who was Christian and he liked me. So we dated. So I started going to church. So I went to church for about 2 years in college, my first 2 years of college. And I learned a lot about Christianity, the institution, the rules, but I didn't quite learn who Jesus was. And so I never became Christian. I never really understood what was so important about Jesus. But after those 2 years, I was very jaded from the church experience, and I became a little bit anti-Christian. I wouldn't say a little bit. Okay, I became anti-Christian, and I pretty much decided I didn't need Christianity anymore. And so I pretty much departed from God, actually. My experience at church was so disappointing that I was just thinking is this God that I've been serving my whole life? The moral convictions that I felt, right, lined up actually with the Christian church. So when I was when I actually went to a Christian church and my experience there was not what I thought it would be, I kind of just left God, and I'm just okay, well, what is religion? What is faith? What is truth? I just started questioning everything. And I decided that, I wanted to seek my own religion, or I wanted to understand things my way. I didn't want to be told by the church. And I was confused anyways. The church never really explained to me what was going on and the reasons behind everything. It was just very I guess I was very put off by the legalistic environment, what you should do and what you should not do. So, 2 years later, when I was in law school, I actually became extremely depressed. And it was only then when I would go back to God. But I had this 2-year period where I was just kind of I don't know who you are, God. I don't really like Christianity. I don't know what this is. I don't know what I just wasted my whole 2 years of my life for. Anyways, more on that later. Yeah, so, well, I guess I'll go into a little more detail about that. So, when I was in law school, right, I felt extremely depressed. I went to law school a year after I graduated, and I went to London, and London is very dreary, and I did not know that seasonal depression would affect me so much, because apparently, or I believe that it's like a real thing. And there are many reasons why I did not like law school, and there are many reasons why I did not want to be a lawyer. But I felt like the depression that I felt in London was much more than that. It was something I could not put my finger on, and it was just like, it was the first time in my life where I started having suicidal thoughts. I did not want to kill myself. It was never like a premeditated plan or anything, but I did not want to exist. And that feeling was very, very strong. And for the first time in my life, I like could not deal with my studies. I like did not want to study law anymore. I was like against law. I was against like, you know, I was just against everything. I just wanted to go home and like just stop thinking about academics. And it was this period in my life where I went back to God and I said, you know what, God, I'm going to find you, because I couldn't find you in the Christian church. I didn't understand you, and I didn't ask enough questions, or my questions were never answered. So I'm going to find you by myself, and I'm just going to seek you with all my heart. And it was just this intention of like, you know, this depression that I'm going through, if God is really love, he doesn't want me to be in this rut. And I don't even know how I got myself into this rut in the first place. I don't even know why I was depressed. So it was just like, I thought that my mental health was more important than, you know, law school and my grades and all of that. It was just, I felt lethargic for so many years. I finally thought to myself, this is it. Like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, right? And I made a vow before God right before I decided to quit law school. And I said, if I find the source of my depression, and, you know, because I was begging for God's help, right? Like, that's what you do when you don't want to exist. You're just like, God, why am I here? So it was like my existential crisis where I was just like, if I can find out why I've been depressed my whole life, I will tell everybody. Like, I promise you, God, you know? And I told God, I was just like, I will find you. I will do whatever it takes to find you, because I was sick of it. I was sick of feeling depressed, sick of feeling like this way this whole time, right? So I dropped out of law school, and that's when I decided to study all the religions, every religion I could possibly get my hands on, and just go into anything just so I could find the truth. I was willing to just participate in all these random crazy things. So that's kind of how the story of how I decided to start studying all these religions. And it's also the same story or same storyline of how I fell into the occult. So before I went to law school, I studied in Hong Kong, like my junior year of college. And so that was like my third year of college. That was when I decided I did not really want to learn about Christianity anymore, and I was anti-Christian. I studied abroad the following year in Hong Kong, and it really opened up my eyes. It was my first time living abroad, traveling abroad, and it changed my life. And there was just so many things I learned in Hong Kong. I studied political science in college. And so I was very into politics, very into like how politics, you know, relates with history, relates with culture, relates with all of that. So I started, you know, when you go to museums and temples, you just start learning things about the world. And I just started noticing because, you know, Asia is very religious, and that's when my interest in Buddhism started happening, because I started, you know, going to these museums. They all had the same statues, like with the same like hand motions and all of that. Started learning about Buddhism and what that was about. And while I was there, I went to see a fortune teller even. And my parents, so my family is like half Buddhist. Well, my dad's Buddhist. And I always thought they were kind of superstitious. And, you know, they talk about like they also believe in ghosts and spirits, but I thought it was all superstition. And they believe in fortune telling, they believe psychics and feng shui and all that stuff is real, right? The Asian, And I always did not believe them, and I did not believe it was good, but I also did not believe it was real. But when I went to Hong Kong and I got my fortune told, I started believing them because that fortune was it meant something to me. I don't know. And I had just gone for fun. I went to like it's a Wong Tai Sin in English. Yeah. That's a very famous popular temple in Hong Kong. And I got the tossing of like the sticks that you go like this. So actually, after I was saved, I realized that it was from that experience that all of these things started happening and I started falling into the occult. So that was like, I went to Hong Kong 2 years before I went to law school, and I could trace everything back from that fortune-telling experience. However, before I went into that fortune-telling experience, because I decided I would no longer follow my moral convictions, that's when I started seeking knowledge and exploring things. And actually, I feel like that was that like attitude that led me down this route. And when I was in law school, sorry, I'm like kind of jumping here and there, but when I was in law school, well, actually, it did start in Hong Kong. When I was in Hong Kong, because of all the patterns I kept on seeing, the symbols in the world, like Confucius says, that symbols rule the world. I really think that's true. I just started seeing all these symbols and patterns that all seem the same. I would even like look up things about like psychology and how buildings are built and how it has all this like sexual connotation to it. If you guys have studied psychology, you know what I'm talking about. So I just realized all these things that I wouldn't realize when I was home in America. And I started like looking into all these political conspiracies. That's what I studied. And I realized, or I thought, that the Illuminati is real, right? So I really believe that was real. And I started looking into this whole like elite system and how Satan is the rule of the world. And, music has just really, what's the right word? Supported or buttressed that idea of like that the Illuminati exists. So like I would watch like the musicals Phantom of the Opera, which is literally about God and the devil, right? But I hadn't, because until that time I had never watched musicals in my life. So I go to London and I finally watched like a real show, Phantom of the Opera, and I'm like, that's what I've been missing. Yes, Satan is the rule of the world. 666 is where the Phantom sits, guys, right? So I had just all these, my mind works in a very pattern way. I just saw all these patterns and was like, you know what, the Illuminati exists and Satan is the ruler of the world. And that's kind of what made me want to know more about actually the satanic world. And so by the time I went to law school in London, I was still in that attitude. I was still in that mode. And I would go to the British Museum and, study all these things about culture. And because the British Museum, you guys, hosts like 1/3 of the world's most important artifacts. There's like the Rosetta Stone, there's like the oldest mummy, like everything you could possibly like dream of that's important to like human civilization is probably in the British Museum or the British Library. It is that important. So I learned a lot about how the world functions in a socio-political and historical fashion, even like culture. And I realized all religions have the same patterns. The statues have like the same positions, right? They'll like kneel down, be in praying position, or do this like Baphomet thing, and I started just realizing this thing. I was like, there's something here that's true, right? And at this time, I was looking for truth. So all of this information really set me up to learn about the occult and learn about how this world actually functions, which is through the occult, because the British Museum is the perfect example of how everything is quite homogeneous when you start studying the history of the world. You realize that the pagan roots go very, 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 very far back, right? So yes, I learned through history, culture, paintings, art, politics. So all of that was really how this all started. And when I was in London, I started believing that witchcraft is real because I would see like signs of people losing their wands. So they'd be like, lost wand, right? Please return. And there was just too many. Like I believed it was true. And like Harry Potter was founded in London, and London is this like dark, grim, dreary place. And I believed that there was something about London. In fact, I believe that London is like cursed because I just felt so depressed there. And so it was all this like spiritual reality that I was just trying to understand and get my grasp on. I believe that magic was real. All right, so if witchcraft, magic, and Illuminati, I believe those things were real when I was in London. So that's kind of how, all my interest in all of this started. So I dropped out of law school, went back home the year after. So I was in London for a full year. And when I dropped out of law school and I went back home, I started doing marijuana with my friends, and I was just very curious and what that was like. So I did it for quite a while. And when I was on marijuana, I would have like hallucinations sometimes and visions. I was very sensitive to the drug. I also started I started dating on OkCupid, and I met this guy who I thought was my soulmate. And it is really this whole soulmate idea that the New Age movement talks about that got me sucked into the New Age movement, sucked into the occult, and had me just like obsessed. That's the right word. Obsessed with trying to figure out, how to deal with this relationship with this guy. So I fell into a lot of deep, dark things when I fell in love with this guy. And within hours of meeting him, I thought I was going to marry him. It was crazy because it was almost like a knowing. And I didn't know whether it was my thought or not. And at this point, I had some spiritual experiences with love. And I was always very skeptical of like chemistry and how love is fate. So there's all this like controversy about how much is love a choice, or how much is it fate, right? Is it just something that's your destiny, that you have a soulmate, or is it something where you still have a choice whether to love someone or not? And when I, right after I went to Hong Kong and had that fortune telling experience, in college, my last year of college, I had this out of body experience where I met this guy and I heard this voice speak really loud in my head. And it was the first time I heard a voice speak like that. And it said, you've always been this beautiful. So it was talking about the guy that I had just met within a minute. And it said, you've always been this beautiful, but you're not the one. And it was this female voice, and it was not me, but it sounded like a future version of me. I was very confused. And when I saw him, every single time I would see him, I would get butterflies in my stomach and fear, this big fear paranoia would hit me. And I never really felt that afraid of men ever before, but when I was around him, I would feel this. And there are times where when I would meet him, I would see his eyes shine. Suddenly around his eyes, it would be all shiny. And I think I actually think I had an out of body experience where my spirit left my body. This is supernatural for me to be able to see that. And after I had that experience, I actually met this psychic in that last year of college too. I met him randomly at an event, and he started telling me about how he could read people, and he would read my character, and he would be accurate. And that was the first time when I started realizing, no, this stuff is real. Psychic and reading, divination is real. Reading into people is real. So that all happened in college before I went to law school. And sorry, I'm jumping to and fro. There's my story is very complicated, but so when I met this guy, this soulmate, right? I was confused. I was like, "Are you the one then? I'm going to marry you." Or that's what I felt. And it was weird. It was like I knew this, but it was like I couldn't control how much I fell in love with him at all. I was so obsessed, and but our relationship was toxic. So it was kind of an emotionally abusive relationship, and we both like did not have boundaries, and we would both say things that would like trigger each other, and I would like try to forgive him, but like I couldn't. It was this very confusing process. And the New Age movement would say, you know, that this is normal between soulmates, and that you would have to like be at a higher spiritual level. Like you would try to like work to forgive them, and you would, you know, try to be perfect in essence, right? So I worked to be perfect. You know, I like would just try to be a better person. I would read everything that I could to be quote quote spiritually enlightened. And there is a lot of material in the New Age movement. So that's kind of how it all started. There's just so many details about what it's like to fall into the New Age movement. And I will discuss these details in a book that I'm writing, a memoir about my testimony and what it really looks like to be in the New Age movement. But as I started falling into the New Age movement deeper and deeper, like things started happening to me. I started seeing like 1111 everywhere and numbers, and the numbers would increase from like double digits to like triple digits as I, you know, went on or studied these things. So a lot of weird things happened. I started seeing things around me. I started being able to sense spirits and communicate to them, and realize there is a spiritual reality. And I think around like 6 months later, I was on this website. I found this website called Galactic Federation, and it's a website that tests if whether in your past life you've, you know, you've been like an alien in another galaxy, and then you are going to be sent on Earth, or you're in this life right now to help Earth kind of go through the ascension polarity game. Those are quite complicated terms if you don't know what I'm talking about in the New Age movement. But anyways, so I did that test, and I did like this page, and I found out I was from Arcturus. When I did that page, I started seeing aliens around me, and I started getting massive visions, especially when I was smoking marijuana. So I would see, you know, quote, quote, what they call ascended masters, archangels. I would be led to all these different gods. I learned a lot about different religions through this way. It was all very spiritual. I was led to the knowledge. It wasn't like I just picked up a book and started reading. And I was led to fortune telling and divination because I was obsessed with knowing how that guy felt about me. So I would do tarot cards. Eventually, I wouldn't even need to do tarot cards. I would just like know things. And I would like do these things for other people, like my friends. They would ask me to like read their future for them. So I would do tarot cards. And I never asked for money, but I did do these things. And yeah, I didn't realize back then that love was my idol, right? So because I was obsessed with this guy, it led me down all these dangerous paths. And I started seeing psychics more. I saw astrologers. I wanted to learn astrology, which is different from astronomy, by the way. So astrology is like horoscopes. So there's like I I wanted to learn astrology. And so I would, meet up with all these astrologers and all that. I would go to all these conferences and learn all this new age material, occultic knowledge, basically. I would like read all these like popular occultic books. And at one point I started, the New Age movement talks a lot about the source. And they say that the source is love. So it's almost like they put the source as God, but it's not the same thing. And when I heard that concept, I just thought to myself, okay, who is this source? Because this source is the head of the New Age movement. And I need to figure out who this source is. Because what if I'm like not like what if I'm wrong, right? What if I'm like doing all these things and I've been, deceived? And I started feeling this way because the people I would see, like the psychics and the astrologers, they would just have character traits that were not very godly. They didn't bear fruit. And I started doubting, and I just thought to myself, okay, if they're saying that, they hear from the source, which is like the highest energy of the universe, then how come they are not love, right? So if the source is love, how come they aren't? How come they show exhibit all these traits? So I started really taking like some distance from the New Age movement and the things that I was involved in. Although it's also very difficult to do that because I was like really embedded in these things. But I saw a couple psychics, and around this time when I decided to stop seeing psychics, I had joined this cult that was called Tsukyo Mahikari. And the purpose of this cult was they had this like pendant necklace that had the source energy in it. And that was how they would heal people. So it was very prominent, popular cult that was known for healing people. And I wanted to like heal myself and heal other people. So I was like, okay, I want to join this cult. Or I didn't even know it was a cult. I was just like, I want to join this. And my friends would tell me like, oh, the energy really overpowers you. So there were times where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to like trust what my friends say. Because a lot of them said that to me. So I kind of like put it aside. And then like this one week, I like touched it again after not, wearing it for a long time. And I just knew for some reason that the energy was Lucifer. And Lucifer is something that the New Age movement says is a good thing. He's not a bad thing. But Lucifer is a fallen angel. Or Lucifer was God's right hand, and then he fell from heaven and now is called Satan. And so some people in the New Age movement think Lucifer is a good being and he is an angel of light. And he was, but he is not anymore. And that is part of the deception in the New Age movement. So I was holding this pendant and I was thinking like, this source is actually Lucifer. And I started talking to it and I was just like, I can't believe what you're doing. You are false light, right? Which is really what the New Age movement is about, false light. You're bringing all this false light energy, false healing, false this. Not to say that these healings don't really happen, but they are not from God. And they, if you've been healed, there's a possibility that spirits have been put into you, and that's why you think you've been healed, but you actually haven't really been healed. It does say in the last days, right, that there will be like wonders and miracles, and that's done from the beasts, the Queen of Babylon, all of that. Yes. So healings do happen, and a lot of them are from Lucifer, kind of like this cult that I was in. So I realized this, and I was talking to Lucifer, and I was just like, what you're doing is bad, is really, really bad, and you should stop doing it. And I don't even know how I had that conversation with him. I was a bit like disillusioned and kind of mentally not there when I was in the New Age movement. And that's kind of how you feel when you're in the New Age movement. You feel like you feel like visions were intrusive. I would see things all the time that were intrusive, and I felt like I was not in reality. I always felt like I was like hypnotized by a force that I could not understand. So if you're in the New Age movement now and you suddenly, life has been different for you and you feel like you're under some sort of like force, you may know what I'm talking about. And I will definitely go into the details of the New Age movement in many other of my videos. So that experience I had with that pendant and this understanding of the source really had me walk away from the New Age movement. It was the beginning of that. Maybe like a month or 2 or 3 months later, I met this psychic at like the Oakland Art Walk or something like that. And, at that time I didn't really want to, communicate with any more psychics anymore. But she said something to me that really got me curious, because I'm a very curious person, and curiosity kills the cat, right? And she was like, you have these entities around you, and that's why you're so depressed. And what she said hit me. I was like, that is the truth. I don't know why, but there's the truth is there, and I need to find it, and I will seek it. So I went with her, and she told me we need to do a ritual to get rid of those entities around me. So we did the ritual, and it didn't work. And then we did the ritual again. And then right after that, I wanted to rape little kids. So it was immediately afterwards, I knew that the ritual had something to do with it. And I knew that I had been deceived by her, by the New Age movement, by the occult. It was around this time that I started realizing that the New Age movement was a disguise of the occult. And all the things I had been studying were from the occult. And this was also the first time that I realized that these entities that the New Age movement said they were are actually demons. And so entities are, there are these souls that, like fragments of souls that attach onto you, that may be from people's past lives. That's what they say. And they may be in you, they may be outside of you. They're just like, around. They're just in the world, right? And but Christianity does not talk about entities, and Christianity talks about demons. And I realized that when I had this experience that that psychic had put demons in me, and that some of the psychics that I had seen were not just psychics. They were witches and warlocks, and some of them really worked for Satan, and I had been deceived and betrayed. And it was also around this time that, I also received visions from God. It wasn't until after I was saved that I could like work it out and like figure out which ones were from God, which ones weren't. But I would have visions where God would show me the psychic I was seeing, the astrologer, whoever it was, like their soul, their whole face was on fire, and they looked like they were in hell. And I remember like the first time I got that vision, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna see the psychic anymore. I was so scared, I was like, what if this is like from God, right? So I decided not to see that psychic, and then it would happen again. So that vision has happened to me at least 3 times. And I would see this vision of how like that same person was walking up the Tower of Babel, and they were like on level like 30 or something. And I would see myself on level 5 of the Tower of Babel, and I was walking it up too. And when I got that vision, I remembered that the Tower of Babel, in the Bible is kind of like God, preventing people from going up to heaven. Like we weren't supposed to like make a name for ourselves. So I immediately felt like I was already doing something wrong. There's something wrong with what I was doing. So all of this knowledge, all of this experience helped me understand that I was being betrayed by the occult and by the New Age movement. So I had these demons in me, and I remembered that Jesus cast out demons because of my 2 years of church. So I am very grateful that I went to church and learned about Christianity. And some of my friends told me that I would only need to believe in Jesus Christ. I don't need to get an exorcist. Because you guys, I really wanted to rape little kids, and it was not just thoughts, it was like a feeling. Like my flesh like wanted to, and I wasn't possessed in the sense that I was actually going to do it, and it like totally took me over. But I don't know how much I was possessed by that demon. I still believe that the grace of God really prevented that, because I really don't know what exactly happened. And I do believe that the psychic that I was speaking to, she told me she would pair up with another psychic, another person who had a stronger spiritual ability than her to get rid of this demon. And actually, I think that's how this like high level ranking demon got into me, because she asked for someone else's help with my permission. And it took about like 2 weeks for me to really like seek Jesus, because I didn't know who Jesus was, and I know that you have to believe in Jesus Christ in order for these demons to leave you. And so I tried looking at everything, like except reading the Bible, which is really ironic. But I would like watch The Matrix. I would just like look at all these kind of like worldly ways of understanding Jesus. And I finally understood that Jesus was about forgiveness. Because I could just never understand what he was about. And I had this experience where 2 weeks in, I was laying in my bed, and up till then, in these 2 weeks, I felt like a zombie. Like I felt like I had no energy. The demons that were in me had sucked it all from me. So these demons that were in me were high level ranking demons, you guys. And I truly believe that Satan was out to kill me. I'm pretty certain of it now. But thank God that I had the grace of, that God was with me, and he led me to understand who Jesus was. So by the time I was, in my bed, 2 weeks in, feeling like I was gonna die. Like I truly felt concerned for myself. I felt like the life energy of my soul or whatever was being sucked out of me. Like I felt like I was gonna die soon. That's how bad it felt. I believe that you can suck someone's spiritual energy out of them so that they will like not exist anymore. Something like that. I don't really know the details of how that stuff works, but I felt like there was a spell. There was something on me that I could not get rid of. And yeah, more details in my book, you guys. You'll see my whole journey. But so I was on my bed, and I saw this woman, like this old hag, this old lady, come at me in the spiritual realm. And when you practice the occult, when you practice meditation, you open up your third eye, and you start seeing spirits, and you start seeing those things. So I was able to see this woman come at me in the spiritual realm, even though I couldn't see her with my physical eyes. So I saw her come at me, and I was like asking God, because I was very scared, and I felt like God revealed to me that she was a necromancer, which is what Lord Voldemort is in Harry Potter. A necromancer, they're like the highest level of the dark arts. They like raise the dead. They communicate with the dead. So we're talking about like deep, deep, dark evil, you guys, coming at me. And at that moment, I thought I was going to die. And I truly believe that she was out to truly kill me, to put a spell on me. I don't know what she was going to do, but I felt the fear on me. And I had this conversation with God where I was just like, God, I've been betrayed, and it's not fair for me to die. And I just wanted to seek you. That's all I wanted to do since I dropped out of law school, and I fell into this occult. I fell in love with this guy. All of this stuff happened. It just happened. I don't even know why. I don't even know how it happened. How is this my fault? I just kept on asking him, how is this my fault? What can I do to make it better? Can I start over? And I had been struggling with depression for so long, and when I was in the occult, I was miserable. I had more suicidal thoughts. It went from I didn't want to exist in law school to like, please kill yourself. It's very, very bad. And when I had that moment with God, I knew I was like about to die, but I told God I wanted to live. It made me realize that I wanted to live, that there was something in me that I had not fulfilled my purpose, and I realized that. It's like, God, I have a purpose here and I haven't fulfilled it. And I promised you that if I could find out what my depression is, that I would tell everyone, you know. And when I was raped, right? I mean, not when I was raped, when I had that demon in me that, you know, wanted to rape little kids, and I realized that demons exist, that's when I realized that my depression is a demonic oppression. It's caused by spiritual root, and that there's a spiritual root of demons and spirits that cause many of our ailments, whether they be a physical disease or a mental disease, mental health. And I knew that, you know, there were spirits that look like aliens or just demons around me that I could see that were trying for me not to see the truth. They were after me, and I'd feel them. And I've had experiences where they tried like strangling me and choking me. This was before I was saved and also after I was saved. And I knew that I was tied to some of these demons because of my family and because of the sins of my family and generational curses, which is something I'll go into detail later. So I figured all these things out in like these 3 milliseconds, which is very interesting. To this day, I believe that the revelation I got in those 3 seconds, when, you know, that witch was coming at me, was all from God, because I don't think it's humanly possible to understand all the information. But when you are in your last moments, you know, adrenaline works really, really fast, right? So in that same conversation with God, I remember him asking me, can I forgive her? Can I forgive this woman who put these demons in me? And then this other woman who's coming at me to kill me? And can I forgive all those people who deceived me in the New Age movement? And can I even forgive myself? All of these things happened. And when God asked me that, I thought about Jesus, and I started thinking about that line where he says, forgive them for they don't know. And I started realizing, you know, how ignorant humankind is, how much we don't realize when we're being deceived, and how wicked we actually are. And I was like, yeah, I can forgive them because Jesus did. And that moment I forgave everyone in my life, knowing that Jesus forgave them. And I realized that it was impossible to forgive like that, like what Jesus did, you know, that Jesus was betrayed, and I lived a glimpse of what Jesus lived. He was betrayed, and he was abused, and he was nailed to the cross, like your hand, a nail through your hands and your feet, nailed to the cross. And he was still able to tell God, forgive them for they don't know. And he never spoke against anyone. He just took the abuse. And I never could understand why he did that. What would drive a human being to go so far to say those things? There must be a reason, right? And I realized that it was because Jesus is the Son of God, and it's impossible to forgive like that. It's impossible to, like, if someone betrays you, to not talk back, right? And show grace and forgive everyone, for they don't know. Like, there's a supernatural revelation there. Like, Jesus saw everything that was happening in this world, the spirits, everything. He was God. He was the nature of God in a human being. And God, you know, the Father, his Father, sent him down his son, which is also of God nature, sent him down on this earth to show us that he's with us and that he loves us. And it was that moment that I realized that Jesus is the Son of God, and he came down. He came down as flesh. He came down as a man so that we would know who the true and living God is. So that I'm here studying all these religions and seeking who is God, who is the truth, which God is the right God. And I realized that this is the one. No one can come to the Father except through me, is what Jesus said. And I finally understood what that meant now, because it's through understanding that Jesus died for our sins that we understand unconditional love. That is the single greatest demonstration of unconditional love that this world has ever witnessed. That God, who would come down as man, would die for us. He would humble himself from his God nature, where he had everything in heaven, and he would live as a man with all our sufferings. He was tempted just like we were, live like us, to show us that we can overcome, and that God cares for us and God loves us, and to direct us to who the right God is. And I remember in the Bible it says, like, if you call my name, I'll save you. And so I was like, Jesus, I believe in you now. I know who you are because I've lived some of what you've gone through. I identify with your suffering, and I know your heart, the heart of Jesus. And when I said that, I saw this vision. I saw this vision of Jesus coming at me. And this all happened really fast. So it was like all of this knowledge happened within like 3 seconds. And I saw Jesus come at me. Possibly when I was like thinking about all this. And I was just like, you're real, Jesus. And he showed me this vision. Or I saw Jesus come in a vision. And he put the 3 demons that the psychic had put in me. He showed me he put them in coffins. And then he walked away on this it looked like this yellow brick road, like this golden road. I don't know. Maybe he was in heaven or something. I don't know. But he walked away on this golden brick road, and he told me my debts were paid. And I didn't really know what that meant, so I was kind of confused. And, I had so many satanic visions at that point that I didn't know that was Jesus. But later when I read the Lord's Prayer, I realized that, I had an encounter with Jesus. Because only Jesus would say that my debts are paid, that my sins are forgiven. And when that vision ended, I felt this supernatural joy and peace that is inexplainable. It was not human. I had never felt that feeling before. And I didn't know then, but I realized later that was when the Holy Spirit was put in me. And I felt like my whole body was full of light. I felt like my body was normal again. I felt like things were taken out of me that I did not understand. And that's my story of how I encountered Jesus and gave my life to him. And it was really a moment where I told God, you saved my life. I truly believe that God saved my life, and I would have died if I hadn't, asked for Jesus to come. And I truly believe that Jesus came to me, that it wasn't me who could understand all these things, but it was a supernatural revelation given to me, and it was the grace of God. And I gave up my whole life to Jesus then, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here right now. So I told him, here's my life. use me. Now I know the truth, and now I've been in the occult, and now I can tell people about it and what Satan has done to me, so I can share and warn people who have ears to hear that all of this occult and the New Age movement is deception. And it took me a really long time to walk out of bondage, to walk out of the lies that I had been raised in the occult and the New Age movement. And that is another story, because this is already an hour testimony. I'm sorry, guys. But I'll definitely go into more detail about how I walked out of the occult and the bondage, and the things that God has been teaching me about the spiritual realm. I still see spirits, but in a different way. And I don't see every detail of all the demons like I used to. That used to really terrify me. But now, God just shows me what I need to know to help me or help the body of Christ. So thank you guys for listening. Please stay tuned for probably the next video, where I'll talk about how I was let out of bondage let out of the occult, right? And actually how it was the Bible that led me out of it. I hope you guys have a great day, and God bless you guys. Bye.